Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of GRG Talks. I am joined by agent Stacy Gravett. Stacy, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So today we're talking upgrades. We're talking upgrades for both buyers and sellers. On the seller side, we're going to talk a little bit about what sellers can do, simple, inexpensive things sellers can do to kind of up that and sort of maximize their sale a little bit. And for buyers, it's kind of focusing more on now you've closed the deal, you've got this home. What are some of the upgrades you can make there? Also, one of the little things we'll talk a little bit about is not letting little upgrades get in the way of a really good home. So, are you ready?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So we'll first try and kind of do, I think, what will really help a lot of folks is to offer up some context about kind of the stakes for, the market today. It's a little bit different. You were talking about before you came in here. It's a little different even today than it was just last year, like around this time. And you brought up some really interesting stats. Can you talk a little bit about some of those stats?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the best way I can describe this market is that it's just really softening. We do see that first-time homebuyers are the average age of 36, and that's up about 3 years from 2021. So that has shifted, I think, because that median home price is over $600,000.
Yeah.
I think it's important for people to remember that, this isn't going to be their only home. The average person has 3 homes in their lifetime.
Yeah.
So don't let something not being absolutely perfect deter you from buying your first home.
Yeah. That's a really good point you made. I thought that was so interesting. Like, sometimes when you get into these situations, you might think to yourself, oh, well, the kitchen's not the way I want it. Mm-hmm. But the kitchen is an upgrade that, as we'll talk a little bit about, isn't actually the hardest and most expensive upgrade you can make to your home.
Right. There's different ways to do it. You can go all out or you can go more simple.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about it from the seller side. So you kind of hit on a couple of the numbers. The median home price is up. Mm-hmm. It's a tougher, kind of more competitive market for a seller. You've got to try and stand out a little bit.
Yes.
What are some of the things that you as an agent have told some of your clients that sellers can do in a very simple, sort of inexpensive way to kind of make their home a little more sellable?
Right. I would say that a year ago, sellers could just put a sign out that said for sale and their house would be gone that day.
Yeah.
But now people are actually expecting, more from the seller. Just kind of upgrading their landscape, cleaning things up a bit, making sure all the paint in their home is touched up, super cleaning everything, and just doing easy fixes if there's, inexpensive things. Obviously, if there's something major, we want to address that. But just those small things make a difference in the curb appeal of your home.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about, when we were kind of prepping for the show, some of the bigger complaints that you hear when you're walking a buyer through a house. What's one of the sort of biggest ones you hear?
It's the kitchen.
Yeah.
Everybody wants their dream kitchen in their new house.
Yeah. And a lot of times that's just not going to be the case right away, right? I mean, you're not going to walk into a house and have it be an automatically perfect kitchen.
Yeah, I mean, it can be for the right price point, but not everyone is in that price point. So I think you have to look at it, that this isn't my forever home. This is, the next stepping stone in our future. And what can I do to make this a cozy, comfortable home for me for the next maybe 5 years?
Mm-hmm. When we talked with John Stormans about prepping for the actual journey, prepping to get into the market to begin with, he talked about trying to figure out the 10 things that you really love or that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And then he kind of talked about, he didn't really go into great detail. We'll put a link to that podcast in this one. He didn't go into great detail about how many you should try and keep. I know it's a personal thing. Yeah. But for you, you hit on it too, the top 10 sort of things that's the thing they should do when they're searching for a home. Is there any good way for them to kind of eliminate some, like negotiate off of this one, negotiate off of that one? Which ones would you say your buyers typically are like, no, I'm not negotiating off this one.
Right, right. I think that sometimes people have a huge list.
Yeah.
And as they start to see more homes, it whittles down naturally. They realize that, maybe 5 acres is too much for us. Maybe we can't take
Right.
care of this, and if we have to pick a few things because it's out of our price point, if we get everything we want, that's kind of how that happens. Like they see enough homes that they start to learn what their must-haves are.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people don't know until they see the right house.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. So you come in with 10 and then you kind of figure out which ones you really like.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you hit on this one when we were prepping as well, painting. This is a really simple thing to do.
Yes.
People don't think about it like throw a cone of paint up.
Yes. Yeah, it's such a game changer. You can completely change the feel of a home by just putting a coat of paint on things, making them more your colors. Even if you need to upgrade the kitchen for a small amount of money, painting your cabinets.
Yeah, good point.
It really changes things.
Yeah, yeah. And then curb appeal. That's the other one everyone hears a lot about. The idea of that's the very first impression that people have when they're driving by your home. Let's say you're a seller and you don't want to pour thousands of dollars into curb appeal because we're not quite sure you're going to get that back. What are some inexpensive ways for them to be able to improve that front yard so that the first impression is really good?
Right. I think that's easy. I think, just keeping the lawn mowed, the flower beds weeded, putting a welcome mat on your front porch, a wreath on your door, hanging baskets, chairs. You can do it all for just a few $100s. And when someone just drives by to look at the listing, it's more appealing to them and they want to come inside.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. Let's switch gears to buyers.
Yes.
So you have so we talked a little bit about, eliminating some things off your top 10, whatnot. What are some areas that buyers might find themselves sort of tricking themselves into talking themselves out of a home? We mentioned the kitchen, really easy thing for you to be able to upgrade.
Yes.
A lot of people talk themselves out of a house because of the kitchen. Are there some other sort of places where you would warn buyers, hey, don't overthink this. You can change this piece of it pretty easily.
Right. Definitely. Obviously, the paint colors, flooring. Flooring is an easy, kind of inexpensive change. Definitely the kitchen. Painting the cabinets, putting on new hardware, bathroom cabinetry as well. There's just so many things that you can do for a home. Just cleaning it, just getting your own smells in there that make it feel more like your own.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about moving in. Where are the upgrades where you can really make it personal for you?
So I know we talked about paint. That's an obvious one. I think that some of it doesn't have to do with the fixtures, but more that your items within the house. Sometimes homes come with blinds on every window. Sometimes they don't. Softening up the room with curtains, rugs, pillows, adding houseplants. It's good for you, for your allergies and whatnot, the quality of the air, and also the ambiance. I tend to go towards things like that. If you've had to compromise, you love this house, but you can't do everything right away. Those are good things to make it feel like your own.
Yeah. Yeah. And they don't take a ton to kind of work on it and fix and stuff like that.
Not with Home Goods and TJ Maxx.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, actually. That's a really good point. Some of these things can be found here locally at a pretty decent price.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Are there any other sort of things you want to kind of let's talk sellers first. Is there any other things you want sellers to kind of keep in mind as they prep their home for a sale? Any other little areas that they can think about when they're doing that?
I think it's just having the right frame of mind. Since we have shifted markets a little bit, you're still going to do really well on your home, but maybe
more mindset shifting, not so much physical.
Yeah,
a little bit more of the mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. You just want people to be realistic. It's still a great market for them to sell in, but there's not going to be 20 people competing for their home. So that's where they just have to put a little more into it. And
have you felt like sellers are aware of that and maybe, are willing to do those sorts of things? Or do you think there's still a little bit of like, hey, we've got to get rid of the old mindset?
Yeah, there is still a little bit of that. I mean, obviously their agent is educating them, telling them how the market is on a weekly basis, and trying to help them as much as they can. There's still some people that are struggling with that, feeling like they missed things.
Yeah.
But they absolutely didn't. It's just a kinder market.
Yeah, yeah. And there's still a chance that you're going to be able to sell your home for the price that you put it on the market
Absolutely.
for, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's still a chance that you might get more.
Yeah. Yeah. For on the buyer's end of things, as they're looking around, do you find that in the climate they're in today, a buyer, we've heard this theme a little bit from even our last few podcasts, the fact that maybe if you're a buyer now, you can ask potentially for a few things that you weren't able to ask for before.
Right. It's so refreshing, I think, for buyers that we're just getting beat out
for
so long. I know there's a lot of buyers that have the money for their down payment, but maybe they don't have enough funds for their closing costs. So that's realistic to think that you can ask the seller to give a little bit towards their closing costs. Feeling like they don't have to waive the whole inspection process, which is never a good idea anyways, but maybe they can ask for some smaller things to be done on the house. If they're spending all of their money, they have a better opportunity to get a little something in return.
Yeah, because when it was a super Nova market, you could just be like, you had to compete against buyers who were willing to do anything.
I haven't seen the home and I'd love to buy it.
Right. That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable.
Where do I sign?
You put out a listing and like a day later it's like off the market.
Yes.
And that does feel a little bit different now. And so maybe there's a potential for those buyers out there. Maybe there's a potential for them to kind of ask for a few of these upgrades to potentially happen. Any other things? Let's go switching gears since we're kind of navigating into that now. Any other things you'd tell buyers?
Not to be deterred by the interest rates right now.
That's a good point.
Right. So a year ago, you might have to offer $50,000 more than the asking price on the home, but maybe the interest rate was a little lower. Now the interest rate is a little higher, but you don't have to go in as aggressively. It doesn't have to be as stressful. It's almost a better time, in my opinion, for a buyer to buy. There's always the opportunity, possibly in the future to refinance. So in my mind, it's worth it to purchase right now when the rates are higher. Yeah,
because you still have a good chance of it.
Yes.
That's awesome. Well, I really want to thank you, Stacy, for coming on the podcast, talking about upgrades and sort of the benefits for the seller to do some of these little things, and showing buyers like don't avoid a home just because you have to make these 3 changes to it.
Right.
Awesome. Stacy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.